Hey everybody, I'm James Knoll, the founder of Root Financial Partners, and I'm here to teach you what you need to know to create a secure retirement. Now in today's video, we're going to go through a case study, because if you're like most people, you've probably heard that you need to have a tax strategy in retirement, and you need to have a withdrawal strategy, and you need to have an investment strategy, which is easy enough, but tying everything together is where most people get overwhelmed. So what we're going to do today is look at a case study, break it down piece by piece to show you how can you apply all these strategies to one particular case so that you can make a more informed decision about your own retirement. Now real quick, before we jump into this today, I want to give a big disclaimer that none of this is intended to be investment advice or planning advice. This is just designed to be for illustrative purposes only. But when we use an actual real life example and you see how we apply different strategies, my hope is that you can take something away from that to see what might be able to be applied to your own personal situation. But let's do this. So I have a podcast, it's called Ready for Retirement, and on that podcast, people will submit questions. When people submit questions, I like to address them and flesh them out in different episodes, and I'm going to pull one of those questions from the Ready for Retirement podcast so that we can use it for a case study on this video here today. To start, let's read through the question that was received. So this is a question from the podcast website for the Ready for Retirement podcast. It says, "Hello, I've just started retirement at age 61. My wife and I have $1.9 million in traditional IRAs, $700,000 in taxable savings, and $130,000 in a Roth IRA. We are currently living off a pension and our savings, electing to defer Social Security until age 70 for the maximum benefit. My concern is that we have a lot of money in the traditional IRAs and would like to bring this more in balance with Roths by doing strategic IRA withdrawals or Roth conversions now while taxes are historically low. We would also like to reduce future RMDs that could push us into a higher tax bracket. The Roth will be invested for long-term growth while we draw down the traditional IRA and our taxable savings to meet our near-term living expenses. So my question is this: does it make sense to draw down the traditional IRAs to meet our living expenses, or should we do Roth conversions and use our taxable savings for our living expenses? My pension income is $65,000 per year, and we would like to max out the 22% federal tax bracket with our IRA withdrawals. We live in Florida, which has no state income tax." So that's the question. And again, we're going to address this, and as I do it, this is not tax advice, this is just for illustrative purposes. But let's start by looking at this example and seeing where we'd go from here. Now, as we do so, a couple of things to note. Number one, this individual lives in Florida, which has no state income taxes. If you're watching and you're not in Florida, you would need to add in state taxes to this calculation, and they're going to be different depending on the state that you live in. Number two, I don't know this individual's living expenses. I don't know if it's $80,000 per year, $100,000 per year, $200,000 per year. I just know income and portfolio assets. So we're going to take that in mind as well. And then number three, I have no idea their risk tolerance, which would determine how they're going to be invested in each of those accounts. So with those three disclaimers, here's what we do know. Number one, we know that he has a pension of $65,000 per year. I'm going to assume that that pension is fully taxable, meaning it's not some type of a government pension or a military pension where maybe a portion of it could be tax-free. I'm making the assumption that it's fully taxable. Number two, we know that he's going to collect Social Security at 70, both he and his wife. And number three, we know that there's a total of about $2.8 million in investments between Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, and brokerage accounts. His question is this, is he says, we know we're going to be in a higher tax bracket in the future. So he's asking, should we do Roth conversions today to avoid that, or should we draw down our IRAs today to avoid that? I love this question, so let's look at this. Let's start with an example though. Let's make the assumption that he doesn't spend any of his IRAs. They don't draw down their IRAs or do any conversions, but instead they live on their pension and their brokerage account. And I'm going to assume that their brokerage account, they're able to make a lot of withdrawals from that without paying anything in taxes, which of course would depend upon any potential gains. But let's look at this. Let's assume that this individual lives on their brokerage account, their savings, and their pension, and that's able to cover all their expenses from now until age 72. So they meet their needs. Their brokerage account is spent down over that time, but it gets them to 72. Now that's 11 years away for them based upon their ages today. So if they have $1.9 million today in traditional IRAs, and if that money grows for the next 11 years before they spend it, well, if they get 7% per year growth, which is an assumption I'm going to make, that IRA value would grow from $1.9 million all the way to $4 million. So growth is never a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But here's the challenge. That $4 million of growth is now, or that $4 million in the IRA is now all subject to required minimum distributions, meaning they're going to be forced to start withdrawing that over the course of their lifetime, starting at age 72. RMDs go up. It's a percentage of your account that you're forced to take out each year, and it starts at 1% and it goes up over time, but the initial starting value is around 3.9% in year one at age 72. So just to use a round number, 3.9% of the IRA must be withdrawn. Now, if there's an IRA value of $4 million and 3.9% of it has to be taken out, that represents $156,000 of withdrawals just that first year. And that number is going to continue to climb, by the way. But year one of RMDs, there's $156,000 of IRA withdrawals that are fully taxable. There are $65,000 of taxable income in a pension. There is Social Security, which could be another $94,000 if they fully max their benefits. Now, not all that's taxable, but a portion of Social Security, the majority of it certainly would be in this case. So it's very feasible that they might have about $300,000 of taxable income at that point. Now, today, in 2021, that would put them in about the 24% federal tax bracket. If that bracket goes up, so if current tax rates expire, if tax brackets go up, it's likely that bracket will go closer to 28 to 33% if brackets revert to where they were before tax law changed in 2017. So if we look at 2016 brackets for a reference, that would put them squarely in the 33% tax bracket. Also, and this is never fun to talk about, but if a spouse passes away, well, those tax brackets that we have as married filing jointly, those tax brackets get condensed, and you start pushing up into higher tax brackets with lesser amounts of income if you're single as opposed to married filing jointly. Now, you might say, well, that doesn't really matter because if I'm single, my expenses will be lower. Well, true, but your required distributions might not be lower. Your RMD would still be the same in this case if you're both the same age. The pension, if there's a joint and survivor benefit, would be the same. Social Security would have a little bit of a reduction because you would take the survivor's benefit, but it would still be a decent amount. So what happens is, at a minimum, this might push the combined tax bracket up into the low to mid 30s. But if there was a single tax bracket at that point, if one spouse would predecease the other, that jumps up much higher and it would put you in about a 35% tax bracket if we look back at 2016 thresholds. So bottom line, in this example, they would probably have a lot of money to last for the rest of their lives, but what they did is over the next several years, from now until age 72, paid a very low amount in taxes, probably in the what would today be the combined 10 to 12% bracket. So relatively low amount, but then at 72 and beyond, pushed up into the 30 to 35% tax bracket, depending upon where rates are at that time. So what you can see here is this created a great tax situation for the first decade plus of retirement, but then a much less than ideal tax situation from 72 and beyond. So the question is, how can we get around that? How do we avoid paying really low taxes today, but then much higher in the future? Can we even that out a little bit? Can we normalize that a little bit to lower our overall tax bill that we can expect to pay over the entirety of our retirement? Now, there's other options for doing this. That's not the only way that it can be done. Another option is don't live on the cash and brokerage accounts today. Can you start to withdraw down your IRA today? And what that does is it creates more taxable income today, but it manages the balance of the IRA. If there's $1.9 million in IRAs today and you're withdrawing that to supplement your pension today, it's keeping that balance in check so it doesn't grow out of control and create really significant required distributions in the future. So what that does is that is one way of spreading out the taxes. You're paying more today, but less in the future when required distributions start. But there's another option, and this is an option that I see being very favorable depending upon your situation and the specifics of any client details. But using Roth conversions as an option is a very significant option, or a potentially really impactful option. So what do we know today? Well, we know that today tax rates are historically low compared to where they've been in the past, and there's a good chance that they're going to go up in the future. So what we can do is we can also look at this individual's overall situation. He has IRAs, pension, Roth IRA, and he also has a brokerage account. So let's take a look at this. Let's look at what we do know his fixed income sources are. So he hasn't collected Social Security yet, and we know that he has $65,000 per year coming in from a pension. Well, the standard deduction in 2021 is about $25,000, just rounding it for simplicity here. Once you turn 65, that standard deduction goes up by $1,300 per spouse, but for today, $25,000. So if they have a pension of $65,000, what that actually means is their taxable income is only $40,000, if that was their only income source so far. So $65,000 from the pension, reduce that by the standard deduction, their taxable income is only $40,000. Well, if you're married, filing, and jointly in 2021, you're going to pay 10% in taxes on the first about $20,000 of income that you have, and you're going to pay 12% taxes on amounts up to about $80,000. It's really $80,250, but I'm just going to round to $80,000. So in this example, this individual will be paying 10% taxes on the first $20,000 of taxable income and 12% taxes on the next $20,000 of taxable income. So that's very low, and that's very nice for today. And as I mentioned, if he just lives on cash on top of that, you're staying in that tax bracket. But that sets you up for a much higher tax bracket in the future. So how can we look to fill up some of the tax brackets? How can we say we'd gladly pay 12% to fill that bracket up? Maybe even gladly pay the 22% bracket to fill that up in order to avoid much higher tax brackets in the future. Well, one way you could do that is through conversions. So could you potentially convert? So going back real quick, $40,000 in taxable income so far after taking out the standard deduction. Could this individual convert about $41,000 from an IRA to a Roth IRA? So rather than spending that money to fill up the tax threshold, they're spending their cash or spending their brokerage account, which is managing their tax bracket and keeping it low, and then convert IRA to Roth IRA. So shifting assets from pre-tax to after-tax. Whatever that conversion amount is, you pay taxes today, but it saves you from ever paying taxes on those assets again in the future. So in this example, what if this individual were to convert $41,000 from IRAs to Roth IRAs? Well, in doing that, pension would be $65,000, IRA conversions would be $41,000, so for a total income of $106,000. If you back out the standard deduction of $25,000, again, I'm slightly rounding these numbers, you get a taxable income of $81,000, which maxes out the 10% tax bracket, maxes out the 12% bracket, but doesn't yet put them into the 22% bracket and beyond. So what they're doing here is they're saying we'll gladly pay tax at 12%, to avoid taxes at 30%, 32%, 35%, potentially beyond in the future. Think of it as like tax arbitrage or tax insurance. I'm going to pay insurance on what I have to avoid a much more costly tax bill in the future. What they could also look at is potentially converting the 22% bracket. Now this is going to be the case-by-case basis. If you don't have as much in your IRA, there's maybe not a need to convert as much. But the more you have in your IRA, the more your required distribution will be in the future, the more it might make sense to convert at the lower thresholds. So what thresholds do we want to fill up to manage the future liability of all that? Now, the goal is not to convert everything from IRAs to Roth IRAs. So people talk to me sometimes of how do I get all this money in my 401k or all this money in my IRA over to my Roth? My first response is you don't. You don't want to do that because the cost of that would likely outweigh the benefit of having everything in a Roth IRA long term. What we want to do is get enough into Roth IRAs that it fills up the right tax brackets today and doesn't push you into the highest tax brackets in the future. So it's this balancing act between how much do we want to pay today in taxes and how much do we want to pay in the future in taxes. If we don't do enough Roth conversions, the scales might tip too much taxes in the future, where this is a lot of money. If we do too much conversions today, the scales might flip in the opposite direction, where you're paying too much taxes today and really not much at all in the future. The goal is to find that balance where we can stay underneath certain thresholds both today and in the future. So can you convert enough to fill up the 12% bracket? For many people, that's a great place to start. We might not see tax brackets that low for a very long time. Of course, this depends upon your situation. Talk to your CPA, talk to your financial planner, but that might be a good place to start. If you have significant amounts in your IRAs or pre-tax accounts or significant income that you know will be coming to you in the future, that's maybe when you might want to consider converting a little bit more. So the goal is make sure you're not overpaying today. Make sure you're not overpaying in the future. But understanding Roth conversion strategies, understanding income and withdrawal strategies, understanding how everything interconnects with one another, that's really the goal of good retirement planning. not looking at one question on a one-off basis, but really understanding how does everything tie in to impact one another on an ongoing basis. Thanks for watching. Again, this is James Knoll with Root Financial Partners. If you enjoyed this video, or if there's anyone that you think could find value in this video in creating a more secure retirement, please share this video with them. Also, please be sure to like this. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so that you don't miss future videos just like this in the future. And if you want more tips and strategies about how you can create a better, more secure retirement, be sure to check out the Ready for Retirement podcast. Weekly episodes full of information, full of strategies that you can apply to your situation to create a more comfortable retirement. And if you are interested in our services and how we help people create their own retirement strategy, please be sure to check out our website at rootfinancialpartners.com.